Hello and welcome to the Heaven Bound Sunday School class at the First General Baptist Church in Truman. We're going to read scripture from the 7th chapter of 2 Samuel, specifically some verses 4 through 17. It's about the situation that happened when David wanted to build a temple for God and the ramifications that happened thereafter. Now, as we look back, it was only at the insistence of the prophet Samuel that David had appeared for an interview to be king. In search of a candidate to replace King Saul, Samuel had interviewed all of Jesse's sons, only to find none were qualified. Now, having been promised by the Lord that one of Jesse's sons would be selected, Samuel insisted that the young son be summoned from his shepherding duties. If you remember, he was actually out with the flock when he was called in to talk to Samuel. And over the next few years, David successfully challenged Goliath and became a retainer in King Saul's household. He served as a general in Saul's army and became the king's son-in-law before spending several years as a fugitive in the wilderness. In the course of time, David became king, known as a man after God's own heart. One of his goals was to provide a temple for worshiping God in Jerusalem. The ark had already been relocated to the capital city. It seemed to David a logical next step to build an elaborate house for it. The only issue, no one had asked God for his approval. So let's read that scripture, and it goes this way. And it came to pass that night that the word of the Lord came unto Nathan, saying, Go and tell my servant David, Thus saith the Lord, Shalt thou build me a house for me to dwell in? Whereas I have not dwelt in any house since the time that I brought up the children of Israel out of Egypt, even to this day, but have walked in a tent and in a tabernacle. In all the places wherein I have walked with all the children of Israel, spake I a word with any of the tribes of Israel, whom I commanded to feed my people Israel, saying, Why build ye not me a house of cedar? Now therefore, so shalt thou say unto my servant David, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, I took thee from the sheepcote, from following the sheep, to be ruler over my people and over Israel. And I was with thee whithersoever thou wentest, and have cut off all thine enemies out of thy sight, and have made thee a great name, like unto the name of the great men that are in the earth. Moreover, I will appoint a place for my people Israel, and will plant them, that they may dwell in a place of their own, and move no more. Neither shall the children of wickedness afflict them any more, as beforetime. And as since the time that I commanded judges to be over my people Israel, and have caused thee to rest from all thine enemies. Also the Lord telleth thee that he will make thee a house. And when thy days be fulfilled, and thou shalt sleep with thy fathers, I will set up thy seed after thee, which shall proceed out of thy bowels, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he shall be my son. If he commit iniquity, I will chasten him with the rod of men and with the stripes of the children of men. But my mercy shall not depart away from him, as I took it from Saul, whom I put away before thee. And thine house and thy kingdom shall be established forever before thee. Thy throne shall be established forever. According to all these words and according to all this vision, so did Nathan speak unto David. Now that David is established as king, he intends to express his devotion further by constructing a special house for worshiping the Lord. Initially, this plan received the endorsement of the prophet Nathan. But overnight, Nathan had a better grasp of the Lord's will, so he brought the bad news that David would not be allowed to accomplish his plan. The Lord had never required his people to build a house of worship. And since the exodus from Egypt, a tabernacle or tent had sufficed. Now Nathan rehearses the blessings that God had bestowed on David. He came from the humble beginnings of a shepherd boy to become the king of all the tribes of Israel. The Lord had promised a homeland for his people, but the judges or King Saul, who preceded David, never realized this well-defined homeland with secure borders. Now David's military success united the tribes and made the surrounding nations take notice. His peace, through strength, worked to provide the secure homeland promised by the Lord. But despite his sincere motivation, David would not build God's house. David will not be allowed to build the house, but God promises to build David's house. This house will not be a structure of brick and mortar. Instead, it will be a dynasty, a house where David's descendants will follow him to the throne. Now, David's successor will build the house of God. In turn, the Lord will secure David's dynasty forever. The Lord will be a father to the new king, supporting and correcting him as needed. Now, kings are people too, and the Lord is very direct in his promise that punishment will come to the kings who commit iniquity. Across the years, the prophets have interpreted military and economic reversals as indications of the Lord's displeasure. The ultimate punishment of rejection will not be visited on David's descendants as had been on Saul's. This agreement with David led to the understanding that David's greater son would come as Messiah. Now, the promise of a perpetual dynasty provided reassurance, but it also incited arrogance in later generations. God's people took comfort from those promises of safety and security. God's people took advantage of that promise when they forgot the conditions on which it was made. They abandoned the lifestyle the Lord required. Solomon realized this when the temple was finally dedicated many years later. The record in 2 Chronicles chapter 7 that reports Solomon's clear understanding of the Lord's promise. Like David, his royal throne will be established if he walks faithfully before the Lord. On the other hand, the Lord plainly outlined the price for disobedience. If the nation and its king do not follow the laws of the Lord, then drought, plagues, and other distress will result. Nevertheless, if the people of God and their leaders humble themselves, pray, and turn from wickedness, then the Lord will heal the land and forgive their sins. And some lessons, well, they're never outdated. King David had to leave the construction of God's house to his son. But God's grand plans went far beyond the building and upkeep of an inanimate temple. In Jesus, we are one part of God's everlasting and holy temple, and one day we will arrive in the Lord, enjoying the everlasting kingdom in ways David could only dream about in his own days. This eternal residence, crafted by God, is where Christ, a descendant of David, reigns for all eternity.